Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Growing frustrations.
Of an applicant point of view, that they're waiting 2 years just to get into the United States.
What's behind the extremely long waits for visitor travel visas? Plus, did BC's 2024 budget miss the mark when it comes to addressing public safety concerns?
We're really disappointed we saw absolutely nothing new in the budget, either on a spending front or a policy front.
Why some are calling for increased funding to tackle crime, mental health, and addictions challenges. And if you have an upcoming flight booked on Lynx Air, you may be out of luck.
Flair and Lynx were definitely our go-tos, and not having Lynx available is definitely a big deal.
Why the Calgary-based company is halting all operations after the weekend, and how it's impacting customers.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Janella Hamilton. Thanks for joining us. For many Canadians, a trip south of the border is a routine thing. It's as easy as making sure your passport is up to date and hitting the road. But if you're a non-citizen, that travel south can be much more difficult. Many must first obtain a visa before heading stateside. And as Saurabh Sandhu finds out, getting that visa is proving to be a long and difficult process.
Deepak Sharma is looking for any available visa interview slots, but it does not matter which U.S. visa consulate he looks at, there are none to be found.
No available dates.
Sharma is helping his friend with his U.S. visitor visa application, having himself gone through the process in 2016.
It was a lot quicker. It was like you can get that appointment within a few days, or 3 to 5 days.
But a lot has changed since then. If you're a permanent resident in Canada or on a temporary immigration status, for all but a few countries, you must first get a U.S. visa before heading south. And to get that visa, you'll need to get interviewed at an American consulate here in Canada. And so while filing that online application will only take you a couple of hours, getting an actual appointment could mean a wait of more than 2 years.
Frustrating, certainly from an applicant point of view, that they're waiting 2 years just to get into the United States. And often that could mean, like, by that 2-year window is by the time it's over, maybe they don't need to go to the United States anymore.
According to U.S. State Department, current wait times for a visitor visa appointment in Vancouver is 832 days, with other consulates in the country also showing lengthy wait periods.
We have a very high demand for visas to the United States right now, not just here in Canada, but globally.
But the race to find the coveted interview spot has also introduced some third-party players, offering earlier interview appointments at a price.
There are people who are giving appointments early, but they charge you a lot.
Sharma says the appointment for sale can sometimes go as high as $1,000.
At the end of the day, if you really needed to get to the United States and you had the ability to pay extra fee of money to do it, and then I'm sure people would do that.
There is no legitimate sale of appointments. Any fees that are paid outside of our appointment system are being paid to scammers.
U.S. Consulate says they're also offering expedited visa interview appointments in case of emergencies and are advising applicants to keep an eye on appointment slots that may open because of cancellations. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
This year's budget included some big promises, like a commitment to fund 1 round of IVF, a flipping tax, and increased tax credits. But public safety wasn't heavily featured. As Joel Ballard reports, some are now calling for increased funding to address crime as well as mental health and addiction challenges.
Jeff Bray closely watched the unveiling of the new BC budget, hopeful there would be some action to address public safety in city centres.
We're really disappointed we saw absolutely nothing new in the budget, either on a spending front or a policy front, to deal effectively with the street disorder and crime issues.
As the head of the BC Business Improvement Association, Bray says local businesses are frequently facing challenges like shoplifting and vandalism. Last year in Victoria, an 8-day theft crackdown led to 109 arrests and more than $29,000 in recovered stolen goods. He says it highlights the need for more action.
Those are all people that are going into the stores, they're stealing from the stores, they're terrorizing the staff, and at the end of the day, that really impacts the bottom line for small businesses. But it also means that you and I are paying more at the cash register.
BC United's shadow critic for finance says public safety is a top concern.
One would have thought the government would have actually made sure to have something in this budget that would actually address what we're all hearing in our constituency offices around people just simply not feeling safe in and around their communities and their neighborhoods.
The province says public safety is top of mind, adding that this year its policing and security budget includes $80 million committed in budget 2023, plus an extra $7 million. Meanwhile, in Nanaimo, the mayor says his city continuously faces what he calls public disorder. He says it's linked to a growing homeless population that he says is now more than 1,000 people strong. He was holding out for bold steps on the mental health and addiction front.
This is what people want solved. Nobody wants to see that kind of misery in the streets of the communities we live in.
In the budget, the province says it will invest $215 million over 3 years to sustain addictions treatment and recovery programs that are already operating. Krog says more is needed.
It discourages people from coming to certain areas of the community. It hurts the downtowns of every community. It drives out small businesses. It harms the economy. It creates a sense of fear.
Since 2017, the province says it has invested more than $2.6 billion in mental health and substance use, which includes new commitments through 2025. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
Police say they have dismantled a major drug ring that has been using fentanyl in the manufacturing of counterfeit pharmaceuticals. The RCMP, along with the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team and Abbotsford Police, teamed up for the investigation. Mounties say 8 men have been arrested, many of them with links to organized crime. One of the suspects has also been linked to an alleged gang-related murder plot.
That included the execution of 11 search warrants across the cities of Vancouver, North Vancouver, Delta, Richmond, and Surrey. It was initially launched in September of 2022, with the searches leading to the seizure of numerous types of counterfeit pharmaceutical pills.
Police say about 350,000 counterfeit pills and chemicals used for making the pills were seized, as well as a handful of illegal firearms and ammunition. Another standout in this year's provincial budget was about housing policy, specifically the introduction of an upcoming tax on flipping. As our Maurice Katz explains, it's garnering mixed reaction from stakeholders.
A house flipping tax is hitting BC next year.
Better late than never.
It's a 20% tax on the profits an investor would make on a flipped home within 2 years of buying it.
But boy, it would have been great if we had this 10, 15 years ago.
House flipping is when you buy a property for the sole purpose of selling it for a higher price to make money.
I think it's a great idea to protect people who want to buy a house and stay here and use the house, because we already have like a shortage of housing here. So I don't know, I'm all for it.
But if you're flipping in under a year, then you're just extracting profit from it. People need to live here.
Profiteering on housing is where you live. It's not an investment.
But some aren't quite convinced the tax would make a significant dent in solving the housing crisis here in BC.
Flipping is a very, very small percentage of the market. We just haven't been able to build enough homes.
The tax is estimated to create $44 million in revenue, which the province says will go directly into affordable housing. Maurice Katz, CBC News, Vancouver.
A Vancouver councillor is calling out Airbnb. Lenny Joe says it hasn't taken down 119 listings the city requested in October. CBC News did reach out to the company about this. They didn't respond to questions about the removal of listings, but says Vancouver is ultimately responsible for enforcing its bylaws.
Well, as I mentioned, they have no legal obligation. I understand that. So as a private business, they might have different priorities. But I'm really eager to see the new provincial legislation, which will come in effect in the summer, which will require the short-term rental platform. They remove the non-compliant listing as the request of municipality.
In January, the city increased license fees for short-term rentals by 900%. Airbnb says these fees will drive hosts towards unregulated sites. The city says it will monitor it closely. Canadians booked to fly with Lynx Air will be out of luck starting next week. Last night, the Calgary-based company says it is ceasing operations on Monday. As Nisha Patel reports, the low-cost airline has filed for creditor protection.
After just 2 years in business, Lynx Air is grounded. With little warning, the airline is shutting down this weekend, putting hundreds of pilots and flight attendants out of work. Lynx says customers with flights booked should ask their credit card companies for refunds, but those holding vouchers are out of luck. Competitors Flair Airlines and WestJet are offering some discounted fares for stranded passengers. The disruption to travelers comes just ahead of the busy March break travel period.
Frustrating,
For me it was, yes.
dejected. It was very chaotic to find our luggage and then sort of, communicate through all the staff members. None of them were aware. I mean, I won't blame them, even they were not aware of this decision.
They actually had us by the runway ready to take off. And then all of a sudden he shuts down and says, "I'm sorry, we'll have to take you back to the terminal. The flight has been canceled."
Flair and Lynx were definitely our go-tos, and not having Lynx available is definitely a big deal.
The company blamed inflation and fuel costs, too much regulation and competition. Lynx was an ultra-low-cost airline. Customers paid lower base fares, but extra fees to choose seats and check bags. The model is successful elsewhere, but experts say here, high airport fees restrict carriers like Lynx from offering much of a discount compared to major players like WestJet and Air Canada.
So all they're doing is they're fighting against the existing incumbent carriers for the exact same customers with higher fares than what you would expect ultra-low-cost carriers to charge.
Just last month, Lynx was launching new routes and seemed to be offering Canadian travelers more options.
What you're going to end up seeing is more limited service. So instead of having the choice of airline, you may have one or 1.5 airlines depending on the time of year, and that will ultimately result in higher fares.
Lynx is the latest airline to run out of runway. Over the past 2 decades, JetSco, CanJet, and Swoop, among others, have all failed to take off. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
One travel agent says that while similar low-cost airlines are successful in the United States, Canadian business models lack passenger volume.
When you have an airline like Southwest Airlines in the States where they have 200 to 300 aircraft constantly moving and also between much smaller distances. So, flying from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. In Canada, unfortunately, our urban centers are generally very far apart from each other. So the cost to operate these aircraft flying from, Hamilton, Ontario to Calgary, it's a lot higher.
Lynx flights will continue to operate until Monday, after which passengers will need to inquire about refunds for existing bookings. Bad news for those traveling by ferry as well. If you're planning to travel to or from Vancouver Island this weekend, BC Ferries is advising you to reconsider as the Queen of the New Westminster is out of service for repairs.
Think about other ways that you can get across. Come as a foot passenger, think about carpooling. And if you are going to come and you don't have a reservation, just come prepared that you might have to wait for a few sailings to get on.
8 sailings on the Tsawwassen to Swartz Bay route have been canceled for today and Sunday. BC Ferries says the vessel should be back in service by next weekend. Earlier today, Premier David Eby said he's, quote, profoundly worried about a potentially terrible upcoming wildfire season and that the province is investing $10.6 billion in contingency funds over the next 3 years to prepare.
We're leasing aircraft, planes and helicopters, expanded infrastructure for our firefighters to be able to fight fires, including do pilot programs at night. Usually firefighters down tools at night and then pick up at first light because of the high risk of flying at night at very low altitudes. We're going to be able to expand some of that work.
EB says parts of the province remain severely dry and about 100 wildfires are still burning from last year's record-breaking fire season. Darius Mandavi joins us now with a look at our weather. Darius, what are we talking when we talk about these old last year fires still burning?
Right, well, we're looking at a lot of zombie fires across the province. So we have 91 zombie fires still burning in BC, and I've been using that number a lot. But actually, some of these fire starts have come this winter. So although they are technically overwintering fires, they aren't ones that have lasted since last season. So just today, we've seen a new fire start. Just in central BC, you can see that here. It's a very small fire, but it is classified as out of control. And it is unusual to see fires start at this time of year, especially in this part of the province. And again, very small, very far from anywhere that it could do some damage, but again, just a reminder of that I should be more careful with the terminology, and also that we need to keep an eye on where we may see new fires, even as we see some die out. Now, some good news ahead in terms of the conditions we're seeing, because there is some more snow coming. We're already seeing it in parts of the province. It's also happening further north, but we don't have radar coverage up there. And you can also watch this cloud start to come down towards us here in the south, and that's going to be the first marker of a series of systems that are going to roll through over the next few days. We have some rain coming to the coast. Freezing levels here not dropping until Monday or Tuesday, but meanwhile in the interior, plenty of snow coming over the next few days. And then as freezing levels drop early next week, we may start to see some snow, particularly in parts of the valley around Abbotsford, but also potentially here in Vancouver.
Thanks so much, Darius. A legendary tap dancer, singer, and actress. After the break, we'll take a look back at Jenny Ligon's legacy and her lasting impact on the performing arts. Thank you for joining our commercial-free live stream. Next week, Alberta will be introducing its provincial budget. Top of mind for teachers is funding. As Janet French reports, Alberta's Teachers Association says more educators are at risk of quitting if the government doesn't ramp up its investment in schools.
Teachers feel this sense of moral distress, that they're not meeting the needs of their students day in and day out.
Jason Schilling says conditions in classrooms like these have become unworkable for many teachers and students, and that a new survey of teachers validates what they've been hearing. That students with suspected disabilities are waiting too long for professional assessments, that the vast majority of teachers say they feel exhausted and are more likely to say they're stressed out than feeling hopeful. The Alberta government no longer tracks class sizes, but Edmonton Public Schools does. In the last 5 years, average class sizes grew in every grade. The number of students with diagnosed disabilities in each class also rose. So did the number of English language learners. The Alberta Teachers Association says the problems get worse every year the K-12 system is underfunded for inflation and growth, and that some schools are already having trouble retaining and recruiting teachers.
This government is failing the students of Alberta, and they deserve better.
Alberta teachers have started bargaining with the government. Schilling says teachers may demand class size ratios in their contract or in law, like in BC and Ontario. Large, complex classes in Saskatchewan have led teachers to hold rotating strikes. Alberta's education minister says conditions aren't as dire as the association describes.
Are there challenges that we need to address? Are there areas that we need to focus on a little bit more? Absolutely. But there's no question in my mind, we have a world-class education system.
The education minister won't give any clues about next week's budget, but he says his government gave schools extra money this year when enrollment jumped. But the opposition NDP says the government will have to boost spending by more than 5% if they want conditions to improve.
Well, who I support are the parents, right? Who I support are the parents who are asking for really, like a bare minimum standard.
Just where classrooms rank in the government's long list of demands, we'll find out on February 29th, Budget Day. Janet French, CBC News, Edmonton.
It's Black History Month, and we're highlighting Black British Columbians who've left a lasting impact in their field. Jenny Lagon was a dancer, actor, and musician born in Chicago. She was the first Black woman to sign a long-term contract with MGM, and she acted and danced in more than 20 Hollywood films. In the late 1960s, she moved to Vancouver, where she taught at local tap schools. Lagon died in 2012, leaving behind a rich legacy in dance and performing arts. Here is a clip from a CBC profile on Lagon in 1999.
I dance, I act, I do choreography.
All is rhythm and you, other songs are tame.
I thought people would like to know who I was and what I had done.
Now you're back up. Joining us now are two people who knew and worked with Jenny Lagon. Troy McLaughlin is a faculty member at the Vancouver Tap Dance Society, and Joel Hanna is the executive director. Thank you so much to both of you for being here, talking about a subject that I'm very passionate about. I love tap dancing, so it's so great to be able to celebrate people like Jenny. Let's just start right there. When we look back at clips for both of you, of Jenny, what does it bring up memory-wise for you, Troy?
Oh, so much, so many. Joel and I were talking about just different memories we have, and just talking about her as a singer isn't emphasized as much because it all kind of wraps into the dance, because she danced and sang and act at the same time, right? But just her scatting a time step. But the way she scattered it was just amazing. You could not get any better than just listening to her scatter time step.
And Joel, I know you're a very talented tap dancer yourself. So when you think of Jenny and the style of tap dance that she did and the style of dance she did, is that an inspiration for you?
Yeah, Jenny had this wonderful power to do very, very complex material in such an effortlessly charming way. And you see in almost all the films that she was in. And the way that she executed these things next to like Bilbo Jangles Robinson in flats, in pants, and with short hair, she didn't care. She was like there. But she did the exact same material. She danced hard and heavy, but she did it so gracefully and with such gentle charm that it was inspiring.
Yeah, it's very cool to see it almost effortless, but we know there's definitely a lot of effort behind it. Oh, yeah. Now, Jenny was an actor as well as a dancer. We've mentioned that. I want to play a clip from one of her films, Hooray for Love. Let's take a look.
It's all the way you look at it,
Got a handful of nothing.
Why, you a rich millionaire.
But I watch it like a home. Well, I'm doing okay, living in a great big way.
Tell that to the landlord.
I'm the salt in the ocean. I'm the sun way up in the sky. I'm Franklin D. Roosevelt. I'm $1 million long as I got a snap in my fingers.
That is so cool to see that. Troy, let's start with you. Jenny faced a lot of adversity throughout her career, being the first Black woman in a lot of spaces. What was her impact on inspiring Black dancers and performers?
I think stick-to-itiveness and determination, dedication, just of sticking with your craft and moving forward no matter what. She did move up here because of adversity from Chicago and, away from Hollywood, but at the same time, influenced a whole lot of people here through her own tap studio and through people she danced with, spent time with and things like that, just to carry on.
And she is carrying on that legacy. Joel, for you, what is the major message that you'd like people to know about the legacy she leaves behind?
Jenny was always so generous with her time, and whenever you saw her, if you ever got to spend time with her, she would always say, come over, and she loved spending time with people and showing videos, and her apartment was like the Smithsonian. Actually, there is a Smithsonian exhibit now of her instruments, and her congas and her bongos. It was wonderful. She lived and breathed, danced and music, and she loved being able to impart that on people because it was shining out of her eyes, her smile, and that little wiggle in her head whenever she danced. She still did that right up until the last show she did. And I think that's her legacy, is her inspiring people with the joy of music and dance.
That's beautiful.
You know, and she fostered that relationship between the performer and the audience, which is the beginning of the teacher and the student relationship. You know, and when I remember what she did a lot near the end was she would go to retirement homes, and she would sing and dance for her own generation. You know, because she would speak of this, that she just loved the joy that it brought to people, and she was very grateful that she still could. You know, and like Troy was saying, there's no one could scat like Jenny. None. She just like a shot, two down,
I love it. It's getting me all jittery.
We miss you at class.
Yes, time to put my tap shoes on. Joel, thank you so much. Joel Hanna, Executive Director of the Vancouver Tap Dance Society, and Troy McLaughlin, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Up next, the feds and the NDP party have come to an agreement on Pharmacare, including new coverage for contraception and diabetes treatment. We'll have those details after the break.
Good afternoon. Salot ina edlanot. Good Yate Podcast.
The Yate Podcast came about accidentally during the pandemic. Willis Janvier was in the middle of a university Zoom class when he started mimicking a radio show. It gave him the idea to start his own podcast about the Dene language.
It's all about sharing the language, hearing the language. A lot of people like myself, I've lived away from home for, probably half my life now, and in urban areas. So a lot of people were displaced, whether for residential schools or foster care. They get to hear the language. That's the only focus.
Janvier is from Clearwater River, Dene Nation, near La Loche. He learned English once he entered into elementary school. The podcast honors his late father and grandmother, who were both Dene speakers. They taught him the language, but not necessarily the culture.
I didn't get to grow up with that, the drum or the songs, none of that stuff. And the people I've interviewed or met have, shared this with me. So not only is it helping a lot of other people, it helped me, to kind of strengthen my identity in being Dene Sutlina.
He recently interviewed a teacher from his home community of Clearwater River Dene Nation. It has a Dene language immersion program. And Alison LeMarche spoke about the program at a linguistics conference in New York.
And when I was in New York, I actually met people who in their community, either they were the only fluent speaker or they weren't speakers, and they were, they're gathering bits and pieces of, reading material or like things that were written to revive their language. And then we have you can walk through my community and all of the little kids are speaking Dene, and you hear their parents speaking Dene to them. And so, it made me hopeful.
Anytime that I wanted to quit, I would get a message from residential school survivors saying, "Thank you for your podcast."
Janvier says he'll carry on, along with, he hopes, the Dene language. Louise Big Eagle, CBC News, Moose Jaw.
The Liberal Party has narrowly escaped facing an early election with the announcement of a Pharmacare deal that has appeased the NDP, at least for a little while. Today's announcement is welcome news to many Canadians. David Thurton takes us through what it means.
Canadians don't need a credit card to go to the hospital, but many need one at the pharmacy. That could soon change.
We've secured something really important, I'd say really historic for Canadians.
The NDP leader confirmed the deal in an interview on CBC's Rosemary Barton Live. Next week, the Liberal government is expected to table legislation that would lay the groundwork for drug coverage for all Canadians, whether they have private insurance or not. Paid for by the government, the NDP says, under a single-payer system.
This is an opportunity to deliver for Canadians, even more in a difficult time.
This legislation fulfills a commitment under the Confidence and Supply Agreement the Liberals signed with the NDP to stay in power.
We have got that and more. We've got the legislation and now a commitment to cover 2 classes of medication.
As a first step to establishing pan-Canadian drug coverage, the NDP says it negotiated a commitment to cover 2 classes of drugs: contraceptives and diabetes medication. Life-changing news, this family says. They continue to pay thousands every year for diabetes meds.
We have health coverage in Canada, but Pharmacare is kind of the unfinished business. So it's definitely a huge step in the right direction.
Still unclear how far this first step will go and exactly what will be covered.
So we want to make sure, again, that we have the ability to choose from the range of contraceptive methods that are available so that we can choose a method that best fits each individual.
Conservatives warn with many Canadians on private drug plans, they could lose their lucrative workplace drug coverage. And while implementing single-payer Pharmacare could help drive down drug prices, it could cost at least $15 billion to fully implement. Plus, buy-in is needed from premiers since healthcare is a provincial and territorial responsibility. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
In Quebec, 2 universities, McGill and Concordia, are taking the provincial government to court over its recent tuition reforms. As Quebin Oduro reports, the new policy imposes higher rates on students from outside the province.
Concordia's application for judicial review was filed in Quebec Superior Court Friday morning.
We are taking this action to defend our institution, and we are taking this action to uphold the values that are integral to who we are as Concordia.
The court document says the effect of the tuition hikes is to weaken English language universities and to reduce enrollment of non-resident students in English language universities in Quebec, drastically reducing funding available.
It's in effect an attack on the diversity, which is such an important value at Concordia. And of course, with those declining numbers, there are financial implications.
McGill filed its own lawsuit in Superior Court this morning. It's also asking for a temporary injunction. The university argues the tuition hikes were unreasonable and adopted following an inadequate consultation process. Both schools argue the changes violate both the Canadian and Quebec charters of rights.
They're really challenging the differential treatment, the discriminatory treatment, the attacks on major institutions that have been very valuable to the province of Quebec.
Lawyer Pearl Eliadis works part-time at McGill, but is a full-time human rights lawyer. She says it's becoming more and more frequent to see institutions taking on the government of Quebec over its policies.
And so I think it's really a tragedy for this province that we are in the situation we're in, and the universities have had to really go that last step in order to challenge what clearly, from a legal perspective, I think raises some very serious questions.
Out-of-province students will now have to pay a minimum of $12,000, about $3,000 more than what they used to pay. Quebec's English language universities will also be required as of 2025 to ensure most of their out-of-province students learn French before they graduate. A McGill spokesperson said the university is not contesting the French requirement, just the tuition hikes. Concordia, however, is challenging both.
I'm confident that we're doing the right thing, not just for Concordia, but for the autonomy of all Quebec institutions, of all Quebec universities.
Eliadis says getting an injunction could take weeks, while the court challenge could take months. The Quebec government won't comment because the case is before the courts. Quebin Oduro, CBC News, Montreal.
There are calls for the federal government to step up its support for refugee claimants after an asylum seeker died while looking for shelter in the Toronto area last weekend. Greg Ross has more.
No one leaves their country to come seeking refuge to die.
A number of community organizations that advocate for African immigrants came together today outside the shelter where 46-year-old Delphina Njiji came for help last weekend.
We know that our sister showed up and she had to wait outside for a long time in the cold.
We're told that Njiji arrived in Canada on February 15th from Kenya seeking asylum. She arrived at this shelter on Dundas Street East in Mississauga just 2 days later. The shelter has been operating at overcapacity for months and didn't have a bed to offer Njiji.
When she first arrived at the shelter, we were out of space, but luckily we were able to accommodate her in the lobby.
Mississauga City Councillor Deepika Damerla says shelter workers did what they could.
The next day she had a medical emergency. The shelter provided her with emergency care, the best timely care, and then she was moved to a hospital and she died, and the hospitals made it clear that the death is not suspicious.
This man lives at the shelter. He didn't want to show his face on camera because he fears repercussions. He says he was also impacted by the overcrowding here when he first arrived last summer.
At one point, we weren't even allowed to use the bathroom inside.
He spent several months living in a tent outside the shelter, waiting for space to open up, something many asylum seekers are also forced to do. He wonders why somebody has to die before people take notice.
Why is it after the fact that they're here talking about her?
We have to ask ourselves as Canadians whether this is who we want to be.
Njiji is the second asylum seeker to die here in the last 3 months. A man in his 40s died in November while living in one of these tents. His death was deemed not suspicious. These community leaders say the problem can't be fixed unless all levels of government step up to do more.
We are asking the federal government, we're asking the provincial government, we're asking the municipalities across the country, what are you going to do?
These advocates tell us that Njiji has 4 children back in Kenya. They say they're trying to raise money to send her body back there so her family can bury her. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada has marked the second anniversary of the start of the Ukraine war by imposing more sanctions on Russia. 10 individuals and 153 entities have been targeted. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly made the announcement today. It is a joint initiative with the United Kingdom and the United States. The U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary explained the purpose for taking this step.
You should expect to see sanctions and actions taken by countries that are part of our coalition as well, that are focused on accomplishing our 2 goals, making sure that Russia can't get access to the goods they need to build the weapons that they want, and also taking responsibility for slowing down Russia's access to the revenues they need to prop up their economy, but also to build the weapons that they want going forward.
The sanctions are meant as a response not just to the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but also to the recent death of Alexei Navalny. He was an outspoken critic of Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Navalny died in a Russian penal colony last week under suspicious circumstances. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has released his most detailed plan yet of what he wants for a post-war Gaza. But as Chris Brown shows us, some of the details go against the wishes of Israel's biggest ally, the United States.
Gaza is now unlivable for most who once called it home. For the first time, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has laid out plans of how Israel intends to control the territory when the war against Hamas ends. The proposal says rebuilding Gaza would be contingent on demilitarization and de-radicalization, although there's no timetable. Israel would retain full security control over Gaza and the occupied West Bank, creating buffer zones inside Gaza where it has been demolishing Palestinian homes. Those praying amidst the rubble in the Al-Huda Mosque in Rafah said Israel's new plan sounds like more occupation. Netanyahu's plan is not new, it's an old plan, said Nasser Attaya. Not mentioned is whether Israel intends to establish Jewish settlements in Gaza, which many of the government's supporters and cabinet ministers are demanding. Nor was there mention of a role for the Palestinian Authority, which now runs the West Bank, or a timeline to establish a Palestinian state, both key demands of Israel's international allies.
What you're seeing is a set of recycled strategies and ideas that have already been put in operation before, and they have failed.
This Jordan-based analyst sees no hope for a sustainable peace without Palestinian buy-in.
To think that you can simply come in and impose a plan without any consultation is absolutely preposterous.
The U.S. Secretary of State avoided direct criticism of the proposals, even as he reiterated the U.S. is opposed to much of what Israel has in mind.
There should be no Israeli reoccupation of Gaza. The size of Gaza's territory should not be reduced.
This is also shaping up as a crucial weekend for fragile ceasefire talks. A summit in Paris has brought together key players for what could be a final attempt to free Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian detainees. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
This week, the Fifth Estate tackles the ongoing issue of food prices. It will examine the idea of a code regulating dealings between grocers and suppliers and why suppliers say it's necessary. Here's a preview from the Fifth Estate's Stephen D'Souza.
Consumers are clearly upset with the high cost of food, but many companies that make the products on these shelves say they're feeling the squeeze too.
There's very few, if any, people in the supply chain who are willing to actually speak out against the practices with retailers for fear of some form of negative reaction or retribution.
What's the worst case scenario?
Complete removal from store shelves.
That's why we're concealing the supplier's identity. They manufacture a snack sold at a major grocer. The supplier says grocers charge them for everything, from placing products on store shelves to delivery and packaging problems, a system called chargebacks.
They tend to often seem like they're made up to pad sometimes their profits.
The supplier says a big grocer once raised the price of their product by $2, money that wouldn't come back to them.
Definitely upset because it wouldn't sell at that price. And if it doesn't sell, like I said, I'm liable. It would hurt me in my business.
The proposed grocery code of conduct is meant to address this, to bring fairness and transparency between suppliers and the big grocers.
We just need to sign a code that doesn't increase the risk of higher food prices to Canadians.
Loblaw has warned a code could lead to empty shelves and could potentially add over $1 billion in cost for consumers.
We had a few scare stories like that in the UK, and none of it actually came into effect.
Christine Taken oversaw compliance for the UK's version of the grocery code. She says the code helped eliminate many of the extra charges grocers imposed on suppliers.
One of the retailers said they found out they had 30 different ways of charging suppliers for things, and then by the time they'd finished looking at all the issues that I was raising, they'd got down to 3.
So far, Metro and Empire, which own Sobeys, are in favor of the code. And while the code isn't meant to directly lower prices, that did end up happening in the UK. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
Who's Minding the Store airs tonight on the Fifth Estate at 9 o'clock on CBC and streaming anytime on CBC Gem. And of course, you can also watch it on YouTube as well. Bird or not a bird? That is the question. Our science and climate specialist, Darius Madavi, has a quiz coming up right after the break.
These are just some of the illegal guns seized as part of an investigation the OPP have dubbed Project Saxum.
The focus of Project Saxum was to infiltrate a group of individuals who were seeking to traffic firearms in the Greater Toronto area.
According to the OPP, undercover officers infiltrated 5 criminal networks involved in trafficking of these firearms from the United States. 16 people have been arrested, and the OPP are still searching for one more suspect.
Project Saxum resulted in the seizure of a total of 106 illegal firearms, some of which were loaded.
Illegal firearms like these are used in violent crimes, such as robberies, carjackings, home invasions, intimidation, extortion, and homicides.
The OPP says that the 106 firearms confiscated marked the largest seizure of handguns and assault-style rifles in the province's history. Investigators have also seized large quantities of drugs.
Several of the accused were also trafficking illicit drugs. Leading up to the execution of the search warrants, officers were able to seize a total of 23 kilograms of methamphetamine and 1 kilogram of fentanyl.
The OPP also seized around $70,000 in cash, as well as more than 100 other weapons and illegal devices.
The potential street value of the illicit drugs and illegal firearms seized in Ontario is approximately $3.25 million.
With the help of Homeland Security in the United States, they were able to determine that the guns were obtained in Florida before being smuggled over the border in the Niagara region.
Additional undercover activity resulted in multiple enforcement operations in the United States and led to the collective seizure of approximately 168 firearms that were ultimately destined for Canada.
In total, 274 guns were seized and approximately 1,700 rounds of ammunition. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Scientists this week observed 3 large solar flares or bursts of radiation from the sun, the largest yesterday. In fact, it was the largest since 2017. Solar flares can disrupt radio communications and power grids. They also cause the northern lights, but only when accompanied by slower waves of magnetic energy. That didn't happen this time. The number of solar flares rises and falls in an 11-year cycle, and that cycle will peak in the coming months. That is pretty cool, Darius. I didn't know any of that.
Yes, we are getting up to the solar maximum, which is what we call when the sun is most active, but it doesn't really have much of an effect on our temperatures here. So that's not why we've had such a warm winter or such a hot last summer. That's not why we're projecting temperatures to be warmer than normal over the next few months. Now, temperatures warmer than normal over the long term, maybe, but not here in BC over the next few days. Temperatures are actually coming down. We're going to have a cold front move through that's going to drop temperatures across the province. So in addition to all this snow coming, and actually on the edge there at the end of this animation, you can see the next system is going to roll in early next week. So not really a break to kick off next week either. We're also going to see temperatures drop. Now, not going to be any sort of extreme warning type cold, but it will be chilly. We also have a snow squall warning in place for this evening in right up here, and then also some special weather statements in place for those mountain passes. Sunday and Monday, we're going to see some significant snowfall. Now, in terms of temperatures, keep in mind, so right now, Fort Nelson 3 degrees, Fort St. John 6. Let's roll this forward. Temperatures start to drop. We see that cold spread down throughout the province. Fort Nelson, Fort St. John dropping 20, 25 degrees over just a weekend. So definitely going to be quite the change that's coming across BC. Here on the coast, much smaller drop, but still going to feel those temperatures come down a bit. Plenty of snow coming across the province. You can see plenty of blue here. Most of that snow falling at higher elevations, but could come to the valley as well as parts of the island. So be prepared for the possibility that you may just get some snow possible here in Vancouver as well next Monday, Tuesday, but I wouldn't count on seeing too much of it. In terms of conditions tomorrow, we're looking pretty calm. We do have some sunnier skies coming out tomorrow because they've already seen the snow that they're going to get for now before that next system rolls in. And then for the more southern parts of the province, that's where our activity really is. Now, if we take a look here in Vancouver, you can see we don't have too much excitement coming our way. Some rain starting overnight tomorrow into Sunday. And then we get that rain for the most part, and that chance of snow doesn't come until Tuesday.
Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Guess what? It's... You were a little slow on that, but that's okay, because it's Fun Fact Friday. And Darius, I've heard you have a pop quiz for me.
Yes, but the fun kind, not the scary, the teacher surprised us kind.
Well, I was a very good student, just saying, but
okay,
go on.
Well, I trust you. Let's test that, shall we? This game is called A Bird or Not a Bird. I'm going to play you a sound, or at least our wonderful friends in the control room are, and then you are going to guess whether that sound was produced by a bird that I'm going to show you, or this mystery thing here. Now, this is, of course, a Canada jay or a whiskey jack. We see them here in the mountains in BC. Do they make this noise? Does that sound like a whiskey jack to you, Janella? What do you think? Bird or not a bird?
It does sound like a bird to me.
Okay, well, you are incorrect. It was a cheetah. Cheetahs and other cats can either roar or purr, or in this cheetah's case, they actually can make that sort of chirrup sound. So, all right, 0 for 1, Janella. Here we go.
Wow.
Here we have an American bittern, which is found throughout the interior of BC in the summertime. Now, what do you think? Does this sound like a bittern to you? What do you think? Bittern or mystery object?
I don't believe that's a bird.
Okay, well, the mystery object was a faucet, because that's what I thought it sort of sounded like, but it is indeed a bittern. The bittern did make that noise.
I'm not doing well at this.
That's okay, you have one more try. Here we go. This is probably going to be, this is probably my favorite. Here we have the superb lyrebird, a bird found in Australia. And tell me, does this sound like a bird?
It sounds like my type of bird, yelling.
You think it's a bird?
Sure.
Or is it a screaming, crying baby? It's a bird. The superb lyrebird can copy the sounds of over 24 different species, as well as any man-made objects it hears.
I always learn so much with you, Darius. Thank you so much. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Janella.
Up next, a story that will melt your heart. How a tall 10 beater got her art into the hands of rapper Ice Cube.
Hey, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On March 12th, join CBC Vancouver's Michelle Elliott at the YWCA City Shifts free event, Reimagining Our Cities, Advancing Equity in a Polarized Time. For more information, visit ywcavan.org. And CBC Vancouver is the exclusive media partner of West Coast Leaf's annual fundraiser, the Equality Breakfast, March 8th. Tickets at westcoastleaf.org.
The Canada Rugby Sevens tournament is back in town for the 9th straight year at BC Place.
Around 75,000 fans are expected to take in the games over the next 3 days. We headed down there to see how the fans are feeling about the games so far. Take a look.
Canada looked really good. I thought they were going to take that first game, and they did not, but they looked good. So, hoping for, good things for Canada.
Yeah, we're big rugby fans in our house. I played for many years, and we've come over the years, and it's great fun. It's great for the kids, dressing up in costumes. So we're rooting for Ireland and for Canada today. So
it's been a blast today, getting to come out here, hometown, home area, and just watching some free rugby.
Definitely New Zealand play is really exciting for us.
I lived in Hong Kong for 12 years, and I've been to the Sevens there since 1991. I now live in Vancouver, and this is an institution for me and my kids.
Oh, the Irish games, of course. Got to see the boys play, and the women.
Irish games, yeah, we're playing, half 5 and half 6 or something, I think, yeah. So looking forward to them games.
Rugby in the flesh here, and we don't get it too much in BC. And it's going to be the Olympics this year, so all these athletes are trying to peak now for the 2024 Olympics. So it's expecting it to be an exciting weekend of rugby.
A tall 10 beater traveled 2 days from her home near the BC-Yukon border to watch Ice Cube perform in Abbotsford.
She beaded a medallion for the rapper, who ended the night wearing it around his neck. Take a look.
Thank you for whoever made this. I appreciate it.
That was like a dream come true. Like, I really wanted to go see him, and I really wanted to gift that to him.
Just waking up in the morning, gotta thank.
Beading's my passion. I do it like every day. I started the medallion on Tuesday, and I didn't finish it until 3 in the morning, Sunday morning, the day we were leaving. There was this silhouette that I found online that I really liked of him, and he's a Raiders fan. One of his backdrops on one of his older concerts, he had a clip art of his face in that Raiders logo, and I thought that was going to be cool, so that's kind of how I started with that. Like halfway through the show, I told my friend, I'm like, if he never ever gets this, it doesn't matter. Like, I had such an awesome time here at the show. Like, he's awesome live. And then my daughter just said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to throw it. So she threw it. I was like, oh my God. Just started freaking out, especially when he walked back and picked it up. And to have somebody as iconic as Ice Cube wearing a piece of my art that's just like a dream come true.
Always nice to see somebody's dream coming true.
That's so cool.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on our free app, CBC Gem, on our YouTube, and our website at cbc.ca/BC.
Have a great night.